Hey there, this is Dave from The Greg and Dave Show. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thank you for tuning into the following broadcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we talk about movie and TV news and reviews, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn a little something about ourselves. If not, then maybe I made you laugh a couple of times. I don't know. New episodes air bi-weekly on Tuesdays. Thanks again for checking out the totally spectacular following broadcast here on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better, adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimel.
Oh no, there's a lot of problems in Columbus as the Ohio State Buckeyes are just about 3 weeks away from opening their season at home against Oregon State. Courtney Smith's accusations against her now ex-husband and how they impact the Buckeyes football program all the way up to head coach Urban Meyer, who has been suspended, put on paid administrative leave. And this is a big story throughout college football, resonating across not just sports, but in the global landscape as a whole, considering where we currently sit in our society with regards to the Me Too movement, with domestic abuse, with sexual assault and violence against women. This is a thing that has completely taken control of every aspect of our news cycle and every industry that there is. And that's a good thing. Make no mistake about it. It is a very good thing that people are being punished, people are being publicly accused, and rightfully so, and charged with these heinous crimes. Now, that being said, as due process allows, innocent until proven guilty. However, it's important to note that there are a lot of these accusations that make it look very bad in the public eye, and it has taken it all the way up to the head coach of one of the most prestigious programs in college football, and that is Urban Meyer and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Welcome on Press Row, everybody, here on this Thursday, August 9th. Christian Heimel with you, broadcasting, as always, as part of the Public House Media Network. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, and more. You can also find us on social media. Press Row PHM, that's the Twitter handle, as well as Instagram. You can find us Press Row by Public House Media on Facebook, or head over to and email us at pressrowphm@gmail.com. We're going to talk a lot about this Ohio State thing coming up in a little bit. Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade covers the Buckeyes. He will join us. He's been at practice over the last couple of days and has seen exactly how this is impacted and what has been impacted with regards to the football program there at Ohio State. But for those of you who do not know and have been living under a rock, this happened late last week as Urban Meyer was placed on administrative leave when the school announced it was investigating the claims of Courtney Smith, the now ex-wife of former Ohio State assistant football coach Zach Smith, who was fired in July. Urban Meyer said that he did not know when asked at Big Ten Media Day about the allegations. He failed, released a statement last Friday saying he failed in denying that he had heard allegations. He had heard them. He did know about them. He knew about them from Zach Smith directly. as well as his boss, his athletic director, Gene Smith, at Ohio State. And for those of you who have followed Urban Meyer, you know this is not something that is immune or something that is new to Urban Meyer. He has had these issues before, 2009 in Florida with Zach Smith, this same assistant football coach who was there. In his 6-year tenure at Florida, 31 players were arrested, at least 10 accused of crimes ranging from misdemeanor battery to felony domestic assault to felony theft to domestic battery. These varied based on the player, from sitting them out for a half to, suspending them for a couple of games, or even just a public slap on the wrist, whatever it may be. So when you look at some of these players, I mean, Aaron Hernandez is one of them. You look at, again, Zach Smith, who said that, Zach Smith, whose ex-wife says she was shoved while pregnant up against the wall in 2009 when Zach Smith was a graduate assistant for Urban Meyer. Courtney Smith said that Shelley Meyer, Urban's wife, knew about this and that Urban has done nothing. So it is a culture at Ohio State. It was a culture at Florida with the football program and with Urban Meyer's program. That's the most important thing to note here. While the schools very much are culpable, this is Urban Meyer's program. This is Urban Meyer's culture, much like it was Art Briles' culture at Baylor. And that is the issue that has come to the forefront in all of this, is the fact that there is a head football coach, a 3-time national champion, the winningest coach in terms of percentage in the history of college football, and one of the more prestigious coaches and prestigious programs in the country that is being accused of this. And again, it's important to note, and we'll talk with Kyle Rowland about this, it is not Urban Meyer accused of domestic violence. It is what he's being accused of, and what they are investigating is whether or not he knew about it, if he followed the proper channels in reporting it, and if he did anything with regards to the reports. So this is very similar to Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky, not in the same sense, obviously, as child molestation, but in the same vein, so to speak. So we're going to talk with Kyle Rowland a lot about that coming up in just a little bit and get his take and what has happened and the latest up there in Columbus. How does this affect the team? I mean, I know it's a tertiary thing, if not further down the list, but they're 3 weeks away from college football, and Ohio State, a team preseason number 3 in the country, expected to compete for a national championship. So we'll see exactly how this all plays out for the Buckeyes. There is another scandal in college football. It is not as drastic and it is not as severe as domestic violence, but it is still one that it brings up and it touches a chord in collegiate sports. North Carolina football announced earlier this week the suspension of 13 players for selling their property, selling pairs of team-issued special edition Air Jordans to a local business for as much as $2,500, after which the school forced every player then to return their shoes. 9 players, including their starting quarterback, Chaz Surratt, received a 4-game suspension. 2 others got a 2-game suspension, and 2 others are only getting 1 suspension, or 1-game suspension. This is what's interesting. The NCAA does not allow players to make money off of their likeness, off of their autograph, off of whatever it is. That includes shoes. This was the same thing at Ohio State years ago with Jim Tressel, of players who were trading their autographs for tattoos. Those things are not allowed. So, and this is at a school that has had problems in the past. The issue with this, and the issue that I have with this, is not so much the player, is that it's not so much the suspension or whether it was wrong or anything like that. It's the fact that this is going to bring up again the conversation of whether or not players should get paid. And that's a conversation for another day, but it is something where these big name, these Division I athletes are trying to find ways to make money off of themselves when the school is already making boatloads of money. Larry Fedora, the head coach at UNC, makes roughly $2,500 every 2 days as the head coach of the Tar Heels, and his players are selling their Nike shoes that are team issued for as much as $2,500. So it opens up Pandora's box. It's not a good thing right now. I can't say it's a big issue for North Carolina because I don't think their program is challenging for an ACC title. But it is one of those things that opens up Pandora's box yet again. And certainly, if it wasn't for Ohio State, this would be further along in the news. This would be the topic of conversation is whether or not college athletes should be paid for their role in making money for their university. So plenty more to come here on Press Row. Coming up next, Kyle Rowland covers the Buckeyes for the Toledo Blade. He will join us in just a little bit to discuss the latest at Ohio State. Also, your listener questions coming up in just a little bit. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thank you for tuning into the following broadcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we talk about movie and TV news and reviews, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn a little something about ourselves. If not, then maybe I made you laugh a couple of times. I don't know. New episodes air bi-weekly on Tuesdays. Thanks again for checking out the totally spectacular following broadcast here on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Back here on Press Row, Christian Heimel with you, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. Still a couple of weeks to go until college football really kicks off, but turmoil already surrounding one of the nation's premier programs, not just expected for this year, but historically Ohio State in the midst of an investigation with regards to what Urban Meyer knew about his former assistant Zach Smith with regards to domestic abuse of his now ex-wife Courtney Smith. And to help us break it down a little bit more here, Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade covers the Buckeyes, covers the Big Ten there for the Toledo Blade. Kyle, we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And if you could, I mean, it was announced earlier this week that the investigation would submit its reports or be cleared up within 2 weeks of that time. But what's the latest that has been surrounding the Ohio State Buckeyes football program?
I would say it's pretty much a standstill as of now as far as the investigation goes. People close to the investigation, I mean, very, very tight-lipped. There's not really much information at all leaking out. So I guess we don't know where it stands. The one thing we do know is they apparently have not talked to Courtney Smith yet because her attorney released a statement yesterday saying so. She's never been contacted by Ohio State, not now, not before, not ever. So I guess that's kind of where it stands as of now. I kind of think an answer will come at some point next week, and Ohio State will go from there. The college football world will go from there, and I'm sure there'll be giant reactions from all across the country.
For those who maybe are a little unsure of, what exactly is it that the university is investigating with regards strictly to Urban Meyer, the head coach?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what did he know, when did he know it, and what did he do or not do with the information. Did he know in 2015 that these allegations existed? Did he alert the proper authorities? Obviously, Zach Smith kept his job, so he didn't face any punishment. Not that he necessarily needed to. One thing people like to point out is the whole, he was never charged with anything. Well, in 2013, Carlos Hyde also was never charged with anything, and Urban Meyer still suspended him for 3 games for allegations of hitting a female in a bar in Columbus. So that's one, I don't know, maybe precedent you could point to, a similar situation maybe where a player was punished. But I think it basically comes down to what happened and what did Urban Meyer do with what he did or did not know. And I think it's not just as bad if he didn't know anything happened. But I think that's also very, very bad if he didn't know any of this stuff was going on.
So what's been the reaction around the program? Positive react. I mean, we saw some protesters earlier this week in favor of Urban Meyer outside of the football stadium. What's been the overall kind of reaction to this and the investigation of their head coach?
I mean, among fans, it's definitely been very positive, I would say. Last week when the initial report came out, I think it was almost a doomsday, I don't know, statewide, like there's a black cloud hanging over Ohio. Everyone kind of thought, he was going to be fired. And once he got put on administrative leave, that made it even feel more like that was going to happen. And then I think public opinion just completely changed last Friday when Meyer came out with his statement, and then Zach Smith's interviews, flooded the airwaves and television. And ever since then, I think everyone's kind of pointed some fingers at athletic director Gene Smith and kind of absolved Meyer of any guilt he may have. And I think the general perception now is, hey, he did what he should have done. He lied to the media at media days, but who cares about that? That doesn't really matter. We want our coach back, I guess is how I would characterize that opinion. I think it's going to be tough. Public perception now is just so bad because of what Urban Meyer said at media days, and domestic violence. It's just a different day and age now where you don't totally want to mess with that. I mean, I feel like even if Meyer did follow the proper protocols, he's almost going to have to be suspended just from a perception standpoint. I don't know if the optics of doing nothing is going to satisfy the masses. Not that should matter or does matter, but I just don't know if Ohio State's going to want to deal with doing all of this. At one point, it looked really, really bad, and then all of a sudden coming out and saying, "Oh, Urban Meyer's fine. We're business as usual." So I think that's going to be one of the interesting point. If he did actually do exactly what he's supposed to do by the book, will he be punished at all?
You brought up the potential future for Urban Meyer as the head coach of Ohio State, and we're speaking with Kyle Rowland here of the Toledo Blade, who covers the Buckeyes. You also mentioned Gene Smith and how a lot of people have kind of turned their fervor towards him. Is this any situation, do you see a situation where somebody, whether it be Coach Meyer, whether it be Gene Smith, someone loses a job over this?
Absolutely. Totally. I mean, the fact that Zach Smith lost his job, and this is now taken on somewhat of a circus atmosphere. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the rally at Ohio Stadium earlier this week. I think that was a total disaster. Zach Smith's interviews, I don't think they were great. I know that he kind of wanted to get his side out there because the other side, was in the media or whatever, but it just didn't go well, in my opinion, for him. So based on that type of stuff, I mean, someone's going to get in trouble, I think. And if it's not Urban Meyer, then Gene Smith is the guy. He's always been a sore subject with Ohio State fans. They weren't happy that Jim Tressel got fired. They weren't happy that they didn't take a bowl ban in 2011. Total lost season. Ohio State went 6-6 that year. It just really seemed very obvious they were probably going to get a bowl ban in 2012, but Gene Smith preached for a year that wasn't going to happen, and then they do get a bowl ban, and they go 12-0, and more than likely would have been in the national championship game that year. So he's always been kind of not an enemy to Ohio State fans, but they don't love him by any means. I mean, he's been booed numerous times at events where he's announced, at basketball games or football games. So there will not be any, sad faces, I guess I should say, if Gene Smith happens to be the fall guy and loses his job, because, I mean, Urban Meyer is the king of the state of Ohio, especially now that LeBron James is gone.
Last thing I want to leave you with here, and this is by no means, it should be the focus. It should not be the focus with regards to this issue at Ohio State, but just over 3 weeks, Oregon State comes to town for opening day. How is this affecting the players for Ohio State?
Well, I can't totally answer that question because they haven't been made available to the media. Mm-hmm. But at practice the other day, there were 30 minutes of it were open. It looked normal. They seemed normal. They all checked into their hotel the other day. That's always a big media circus where the media kind of hangs out at the hotel and sees who comes and makes sure everyone that's expected to be there is there. I mean, I would say the attitude was normal. Kind of a business as usual. They seemed very loose. They're all smiling and everything. Practice the other day. I mean, if you dropped in from Mars and didn't know what was going on, I don't think you would have thought anything was amiss. Mickey Marotti, Urban Meyer, longtime strength coach, was kind of running things along with Ryan Day, the acting head coach. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like a normal practice, like it was 2012, 13, 14, or any other year Urban Meyer was in Ohio State. So I don't think there's been, major, turmoil or anything inside, the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. But that could change drastically. I mean, it's only been a few practices. A lot of this stuff at the beginning is all scripted and they know what's going on. But I mean, if you get to game week and preparations are going on without Urban Meyer there, I think it would be drastically different. And I mean, Oregon State's really bad, so I don't think Ohio State's going to lose if they don't have Urban Meyer. But say he's suspended 4 games. Mm-hmm. One of those games is TCU in Arlington, Texas, which is neutral site, but it's basically a TCU home game. Yep. I know they lost a lot of people, and they're trying to work in a quarterback as well, just like Ohio State. But I think a Ohio State team without Urban Meyer going on a road game, early in the season, first road game, hostile environment. Dwayne Haskins, I mean, he still has only played, one half against Michigan. I understand it was a really, really good half, and he let him back. But I just think that game becomes infinitely harder if Urban Meyer is not on the sidelines for Ohio State. So I think that's kind of, when you'll find out how different things are in the locker room, when they find out whether they have their coach or they don't have their coach.
It's Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade, covers the Ohio State Buckeyes. Follow him on Twitter at Kyle Rowland. Kyle, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch as things progress a little bit over there in Columbus.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, that's Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade covering the Ohio State Buckeyes. We appreciate the time there, and back in just a little bit, we'll recap a little bit of what Kyle said, and then, of course, get to your listener questions as well. It's all coming up right here on Press Row.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com.
How's it going, everybody? This is Keith.
And Katie, hosts of Coffee with Keith and Katie, here on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. When you're done here, I hope you'll check out our show, Coffee with Keith and Katie,
where we talk about our lives and relationship over a cup of coffee.
A new episode airs on Facebook Live every Monday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie.
Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row here on this Thursday, August 9th. Christian, I'm here with you. Big thanks to Kyle Rowland for joining us on the program here and breaking down Ohio State football and the latest. I mean, it's interesting, to hear him talk about how it feels as though the public perception has shifted more to blame Gene Smith, which, listen, I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I think Gene Smith is just as, if not more culpable than Urban Meyer. Because if Urban Meyer did report and did go through the proper protocol that he's supposed to in reporting to his AD, and the AD does nothing about it, then it's the AD's fault. That being said, I also firmly believe that anybody who helps to hide, or if it comes out that Urban Meyer did help to cover things up or help to change the course of how it was reported, he should lose his job as well. But we will wait and see and find out about all of that. So big thanks to Kyle, and go follow him on Twitter at Kyle Rowland, Rowland, to get all the latest information, as he's right there covering it all for the Toledo Blade. All right, wrap up shop as we do every single week with your listener questions. You can always submit them on social media, Twitter and Instagram handle at PressRowPHM. You can find us on Facebook, Press Row by Public House Media, or email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Jeff in Queens, Jacob deGrom now has a 1.77 ERA, but only 6 wins. Does he deserve to win the Cy Young? He should be in the conversation, most definitely. I mean, 6-7 with a 1.77 ERA is not a great record. However, he is in the top 3 in the National League in innings pitched, strikeouts, opponent batting average, WHIP, and ERA. There is only one other pitcher in the National League who is in the top 3 in all 5 of those categories. His name is Max Scherzer, and he will probably win the Cy Young Award. But a .77 ERA in 23 starts. I don't care that he's 6-7. He's thrown 152 in the third innings. He struck out 183 batters. His opponent batting average is .205, and his WHIP is 0.96. This kid is unbelievable right now, and it underscores and exemplifies just how terrible the Mets have been. The fact that they have one guy who is in the top 3 in those 5 categories in the National League. One of only 2 who is in the top 5 in all 3 of those categories in the National League. And they can't, win games. And he's, gonna not, he won't win the Cy Young because Max Scherzer will. Scherzer at 15-5, with a opponent batting average of 198 and a WHIP of, I think it's .92 or something like that, .98, and an ERA of like 203 or something like that. Like, Scherzer's going to win it. But it's just, one of those things. I don't get it. I don't know how the Mets can be this bad, but at the same time, I cannot say that I am surprised. And I would love for DeGrom to win it, much like Felix Hernandez did a few years ago when he only had, I think it was 10-11 or something like that was his record. So it'd be nice to see that, but I don't think it's going to happen. Mark in Alabama, Coach Nick Saban says Jalen Hurts' words haven't affected the team. What do you think on the Alabama quarterback situation? Look, I've said this multiple times. To be a quarterback, you have to be a solid passer, and Jalen Hurts is not that. Tua Tagovailoa, he is a very good passer, as exemplified by the second half of the national championship game. So I think he should be the starting quarterback. I know Jalen Hurts wants to be. I know he's not happy about it, but let me tell you right now, if the kid's better, sit on the bench and win another national championship this year, red shirt, go play somewhere else for 2 years, because you're going to have 2 years of eligibility once you graduate in December. So I don't know what Jalen is complaining about when he's got a chance to win another national title. I get that he wants it, but he's not going to. I think Tua should be the starting quarterback. I just think he's better from a passing standpoint, and that's going to help. Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide win another title. So we'll see what happens. Last one here. Eric in Philadelphia, the NCAA announcing new college basketball policy, including player agents and longer postseason bans. Your thoughts on what they had to say? Look, there's a lot of new rule changes that came out yesterday. A lot of it is in response to the FBI's investigation about corruption over the last 2 years. Among the significant changes to the NBA draft since 2016, eligible underclassmen were able to enter the NBA draft and participate in the combine and then return to school as long as they withdrew from the draft no more than 10 days after the combine. What this will allow them to enter the draft, participate, and return to school if they go undrafted. The only requirements are they request an evaluation from the NBA's Undergraduate Advisory Council before deciding to enter the draft, and notify their school's athletic director of their intent to return by 5 p.m. the Monday after the draft. Players who return would be ineligible for the draft until the end of their next college basketball season. I love this. I think this is something that needs to happen. I have always thought this. If if Michael Porter Jr. goes in and say he didn't get drafted, and he's a great, subject here because his back injury might keep him out for this season, who knows? But if he doesn't get drafted, he should be allowed to go back and play. He shouldn't lose that opportunity just because he didn't get drafted. I think it's great for the students. I think it's great for college basketball, and I think it's the right move for the NBA. Other ones with regards to enforcement is going to be, a little bit longer postseason bans, just in case when something goes wrong. Up to 5 years of a postseason ban, coach suspensions beyond a year, and longer employment limitations, potentially a lifetime show cause order. So there's a lot there that could be affected. And I think that's good. I think there needs to be more teeth because the NCAA is not a governing body. It is a marketing arm. And that is what we need to remember most importantly about it. Recruiting changes a little bit here. They can now take as many as 15 official visits instead of only 5 for basketball prospects. I think that's great. Give them more options to choose from. And then the NCAA will allow college players to be represented by NBA Players Association certified agents. They must be NCAA certified no later than August 1st, 2020. Beginning after any season, as long as they request an evaluation again from the Undergraduate Advisory Committee. I don't know how I feel about allowing agents to negotiate with college players while they are still in college. I don't think that really helps much. That's probably the only one that bothers me a little bit. If the NBA and the NBA's Players Association change their rules and make high school players eligible for the draft at age 18, they can sign with an NCAA certified agent starting July 1st before their senior year of high school, as long as they've been identified as what is determined an elite senior prospect by USA Basketball. So USA Basketball will determine if this rising high school senior is elite. If he is, he can start working with an agent. And again, I let the kids play basketball. When you start getting agents involved, that's when it starts becoming messy, especially if they are still in college. So there's so much that's just... I like the ideas. They've got some good ones here, but for the most part, it is a scary, scary, scary slope that they could be going down, especially with regards to allowing agents to start talking to 17, 16-year-old kids in high school as they're trying to make a decision on what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. So I like some of them. The postseason bans I think are great. I think allowing a kid to go back to school if he doesn't get drafted is phenomenal, especially for some of these kids who maybe try to go in their freshman or sophomore year and don't get drafted, and now they're without any opportunity to play college basketball anymore. So I think that's a big one for them as well. Would love to see that continue, and hopefully it's good for college basketball because Lord knows college basketball needs some positivity here as we get a little bit closer to it, especially with everything going on in college football right now. As always, we thank you guys for your questions. You can submit them every single week on Instagram and Twitter at PressRowPHM. Find us on Facebook, Press Row by Public House Media, or email the show, pressrowphm@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter as well, at Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, thephmedia.com, where you can get some show gear as well, Stitcher.com, or wherever you may get your podcasts. Big thanks to Kyle Rowland, once again, of the Toledo Blade, covers the Ohio State Buckeyes, for joining us here on the show this week. Looking forward to it. As always, we appreciate you guys joining us, and we will see you once again next week on Press Row, presented by the Public House Media Network.